northern Waller County, and we bought 21 acres, and we said we were going to manage it like a prairie. Now, why would we want to manage it like a prairie? We were going to restore it using all the techniques we learned about. We wanted to manage it like a prairie because of soil health. In a teaspoon of healthy prairie soil, there's more living organisms than there are people on the planet. There are nematodes and bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and arthropods. And so we wanted to create this healthy soil, and in a prairie, that soil can go down 6 feet of biological activity. Great nutrient cycling, great ability to sequester carbon. It's regenerative agriculture that we were going to do. A prairie can absorb 9 inches of rain an hour. Your front yard can absorb maybe a 1/4 inch here in Houston, ½ inch at best. And a plowed field actually is worse than that. Because a plowed field has no biological activity and it has no root structure. There's no place for the water to go.
They can't find your slides.
Can't find my slides. Well, that's not good. Well, I've got them on my iPad. Everybody wants to see them. So this is a satellite shot of Hurricane Harvey. If you looked at a satellite shot of the Hurricane Harvey area, you would find that it's almost all green space, very little concrete. The reason the Brazos and Colorado flooded was because of runoff from green space. If all that green space had been able to I'm going to have to get something out of here since I don't have slides. If all that green space had been able to absorb 9 inches of rain an hour, then we wouldn't have had the flooding. Now, we would have had flooding at 50 inches. We wouldn't have flooding normally. We would have flooding at 50 inches. There are records of people, when this was all prairie, coming to find Ellen's Landing and walking through 9 inches of water up to their knees. But we would lessen the flooding. When we had these 4-inch rains, we could get rid of a lot of the flooding. But how do we do that? How do we turn green space into healthy soil? We get my list. Should have done that. I don't know what happened to mine. How do we turn healthy soils in? Well, I have a group of 5 rules that we use for doing our soil. The first rule is never use any chemicals. The only reason you use a chemical is to take care of what the biology isn't doing. Everything needs to be done by the biology. The second rule is never have bare soil. Bare soil is exposed to the elements. It gets too hot, it gets too cold. At 70 degrees, we use 100% of the moisture that's in the ground. At 70 degrees, we get optimum carbon cycling. At 100 degrees, we get zero carbon cycling when the soil is 100 degrees. Soil that's bare out in our temperatures right now is over 100 degrees. It's warmer. The soil in my garden yesterday when I measured it was at 80 degrees when it was 98 outside. At 100 degrees, we only get about 15% of the moisture available. At 100, above that, we get no moisture. Colder soil is the same thing. So keep the soil covered at all times. Well, of course, this means we don't plow. When you plow the soil, you have destroyed the city that's underneath the ground. In the first 2 inches of soil, there is a little city down there that's much more complicated than Houston. It's got fungal strands of roadways going through. It's got construction going on all the time. It's got death, it's got birth happening at all times. And then it gets below that, you have your bacteria are less, you have less fungal, so it's more like the suburbs, and when you get down to 6 feet, it's like the rural. You have less activity as it goes, but you've got to have that activity at all times. And when you plow, you've destroyed that entire city. You think Hurricane Harvey was bad, just imagine them coming through and plowing this place. You know, some of us would get back up the next morning and start rebuild the city. Well, that's what happens when we plow a field. The bacteria, the fungus, they get up and they start to try to rebuild their little city underneath the ground. The third rule that we like to use is crop diversity. That's the fourth rule, isn't it? Crop diversity. We want to have different kinds of roots and different kinds of leaf shapes all over, all the time. Different roots exude amino acids and sugars, and that's what feeds the microbes. So if you only have one type of plant, say you have the sorghum, the only thing it's doing is feeding sugar to those microbes. But if you had a legume in there too, it would be feeding proteins into it. So with different roots will give us different feed to the microbes. Different leaf shapes have different abilities to cycle carbon. They'll cycle different types of carbon. A dill plant is going to cycle different than a kale. Now also, when I say cycle carbon, we're talking photosynthesis here. So they're growing at different rates also. They also bring in different types of insects. We want beneficial insects. Nobody goes out into the prairie and sprays for too many grasshoppers. Nature takes care of that. The reason we use chemistry in farming is because we didn't use biology. The next thing is to have living roots in the ground all times. That's pretty easy to do down here in Texas, but I learned this from a guy in North Dakota, so it can be done. If you feed somebody 6 months out of the year, like we feed our gardens, especially in the north, and then you feed them a nice healthy meal, and then you put them on bread and water for the winter, and then you expect them to jump back in when the spring comes again. Now you've got to feed them all year long. You've got to feed those microbes in the soil all year long. Now this is where, and then the last one is integrate animals. Now that's kind of hard to do here in the city, but it's very easy for me to do in my place. Your neighbor might get upset having a cow in your front yard. But we use animals and we try to mimic the movement of the herds through the prairies. So we're using sheep and chickens right now, and one of the things that sheep and chickens have in common is they've all got a weed eater in the front end. They've all got a manure spreader on the back, and they got four or two chickens, soil aerators that mash that manure in with dying plants. Because any place you've got living plants, you've got dying plants. They mash that into the ground, and they work it up to feed the microbes. And we move those animals every other day, and sometimes they go into a garden, and sometimes they're out in a pasture. So how does it work? 17 years we've been doing this. Well, this is the slide I really wanted to show you, and I'll show it. I had it on my iPad. You don't get to see it if you want. But all of my neighbors sat underwater for a week. All my neighbors who plowed sat underwater for a week. Some of them had 6-8 inches of water on their ground. We were working in the garden Monday after Harvey. We had no mud. We lost one chicken. It got too wet, it got sick, out of 500. Wow. We did not flood at all. There's another slide that I had. This is my pasture, my lowest part. Now, we're not at 50 feet above sea level. We're at 270 feet above sea level, and we're on a 2-degree slope. But there's a creek that runs on one side of my property. And in 2001, when we bought the property, that creek flooded at a 12-inch rain. It was 2002, actually. We had a 12-inch rain in August, very similar to this one. And I canoed the pasture. And after Harvey, my sheep were on that pasture. In 17 years, we had managed to keep that creek from flooding 10 feet out of its banks instead of the 50 feet that it had previous years. Now, how do we do this in a city? How do we do this in a park? We can do it on roadsides. Well, we got to, first of all, we got to change the idea that the most beautiful thing in the world is the most expensive crop we grow in America, and it's called grass. We got to get over this. It is the most expensive crop that we grow anywhere, much more than anything else. And we have to mow it, we have to maintain it, we put chemicals on it, it pollutes. So we've got to have front yard gardens be accepted. We've got to have front yard, and I'm speaking the English country gardens, the flower gardens. These have crop diversity, and they have deep roots, Or a St. Augustine grass, when it's cut this big, has roots about that deep. That's why it won't absorb any water. In farming, conservation tillage. There is a no-till. It actually works. It's not as great as what we're doing, but it can work. It can work for large commercial farmers. Ranchers can mimic the herds using mob grazing, where they move them every day, move their cattle, and don't move them back onto that place for like 60 days. Easy to do, doesn't take any more land, and it works perfectly well. But so many of our farmers are not really farmers, they're landowners. And they just put some cows out there because they get tax valuation on it. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say there. Oh, and the roadsides, we do that. We do the roadsides for 3 months in the spring, simply because Lady Bird Johnson talked everybody into letting wildflowers grow. Well, why don't we do that all year long? You can mow it once in a while. All of this saves money. We don't have to go and ask for funding. Everything here is less expensive than what we're doing right now. Again, grass is the most expensive crop in America. Thank you.
You'll know what I'm going to say. My deep apologies to Glen for not having his PowerPoint there. Can you hear me on that? Yes. Okay, what we're going to do now is transition to table talks. Our 3 speakers here, they will be on tables 1, 2, and 3.